When Star Trek Discovery first aired in 2017, it brought Star Trek its first ever explicitly gay main characters. It was a huge deal for the 50-year-old franchise, especially considering that Star Trek has always been about celebrating diversity. But did you know that this wasn't the first time Trek tried to tackle queer issues? And no, I'm not talking about the blink and you'll miss it nod to Sulu being gay in Star Trek Beyond, even though it was kind of adorable. No, Trek's history with queer issues began decades earlier, both from fans and the creators. So let's explore Star Trek's queer history. It's time to nerd out. That didn't happen. Back in 1966, Star Trek burst onto the airways in living color. Following the voyages of the USS Enterprise, Star Trek showed a vision of the future where humanity had overcome its differences in order to create a society that focused on exploration. Exploration not only of technology and the galaxy, but of what it means to be human. And one of the ways it tried to do this was by celebrating diversity. The main cast included a black woman, a Russian, and a Japanese American. For a show made in 1960s America, which was dealing with segregation, the Cold War, and the memory of the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, the idea that all these identities would one day not only coexist, but work together for the betterment of humanity was a radical and much needed dose of optimism. Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry even stated that Star Trek was an attempt to say that humanity will reach maturity and wisdom on the day that it begins not just to tolerate, but to take a special delight in differences in ideas and differences in life forms. Star Trek was a show all about celebrating diversity, as well as tackling prescient issues of morality head on.
These words and the words that follow were not written only for the Yangs, but for the Coms as well.
Coms?
They must apply to everyone, or they mean nothing. Do you understand?
So it was a bit of a disappointment that the original series never overtly tackled queer themes. Yet Star Trek touched upon a breadth of issues, including numerous topics of race and politics that were more directly in the public consciousness during the 60s. So the fact that it missed queer issues was, while disappointing, only a minor knock against the importance of the show.
Risk. Risk is our business. That's what the Starship is all about. That's why we're aboard her.
However, when the franchise came back to television in the late 1980s and the early 1990s with Star Trek The Next Generation, LGBTQ issues were right in the middle of American politics and consciousness. Stonewall had occurred back in 1969, the same year the original Star Trek was canceled. The AIDS crisis was leaving hundreds of queer men and women dead weekly. Gay rights proponents held a national march on Washington in 1987. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was put into effect in 1993. That same year, Hawaii ruled that a ban on gay marriage may be against the state's constitution, one of the first states to do so. Queer issues seemed ripe for discussion on a show all about tackling morality issues of the day. Creator Gene Roddenberry seemed to agree, stating that there would be gay characters on the show in 1987. He also stated that, quote, "My attitude towards homosexuality has changed. I came to the conclusion that I was wrong. I would sometimes say something anti-homosexual off the top of my head because it was thought, in those days, to be funny. I never really deeply believed those comments, but I gave the impression of being thoughtless in those areas. I have, over many years, changed my attitude about gay men and women." Former original series star Leonard Nimoy even offered his support for gay characters, stating, "It is entirely fitting that gays and lesbians will appear unobtrusively aboard the Enterprise, neither objects of pity nor melodramatic attention." In response, Star Trek writer David Gerrold wrote up a draft of a script called Blood and Fire that featured two male crew members in a relationship, set against an allegorical story about people suffering from AIDS. Yet, this episode never went into production. Gerrold stated that this was because it was met with opposition from Paramount, who worried that since Star Trek The Next Generation aired during the afternoons in some areas of the country, children would see the episode. And gay issues was still thought of at that time as not something that children should see. Yet, some argued that office politics, rather than the studio, caused the script to never be produced. Some also pointed fingers at Star Trek executive producer Rick Berman. In the end, the promised gay character never materialized, despite Roddenberry reiterating to The Advocate that gay crew members would appear on the show during the 5th season. Gene Roddenberry died soon after that interview. Rick Berman was given control of the franchise, and Star Trek wouldn't have an out queer cast member throughout his entire tenure running the franchise through 3 more TV series and several films. Ronald D. Moore, a former writer for Next Generation, as well as its spin-off Deep Space Nine and Battlestar Galactica, was quoted as saying, "This is one of those uncomfortable questions I hated getting when I was working on the show, because there is no good answer for it. There is no answer for it other than people in charge didn't want gay characters in Star Trek. Period. Paramount left us alone. They always left us alone. They wanted Next Gen to do what it wanted. The studio was not the problem here." Kate Mulgrew, the lead actress on Star Trek Voyager, also stated, "Star Trek is very strangely by the book in this regard. Rick Berman, who is a very sagacious man, has been very firm about certain things. I've approached him many times over the years about getting a gay character on the show, one whom we could really love, not just a guest star. You know, we had blacks, Asians, we even had a handicapped character. And so I thought, this is now beginning to look a bit absurd." And he said, "In due time." Some have taken these quotes to insinuate that Rick Berman was the lead figurehead behind keeping queer representation off of Star Trek, though it's never officially been confirmed. And while it's fair to criticize Rick Berman for his decisions, it's also worth noting that he may have faced pressure from other influences, such as the world at large, that did not have many representations of gay characters on television at that time. It also should be noted that Rick Berman did help facilitate numerous storylines that touched upon queer issues throughout his time on Star Trek. In 1992, The Next Generation aired The Outcast, which featured Commander Riker falling in love with Soren, a member of an androgynous race. I've done a previous video on this episode and how it both succeeded and failed in showcasing gay and transgender issues. However, importantly, many, including Riker actor Jonathan Frakes, took issue with the fact that the androgynous race was only played by women, which resulted in the show not actually featuring the first male-only kiss in the series. Yet Rick Berman hoped that the episode would end the criticism about, quote, the gay issue. In 1995, Deep Space Nine featured an episode where the character Jadzia, who remembers past lives due to her being a joined Trill, considers reuniting with a female partner and lover from a past life, which is a taboo in Trill society. The taboo, however, was not about same-sex issues, but about being with a lover from another lifetime. While one could alternatively read this as both progressive and also behind the times, the episode did feature a female-only kiss, which led to the episode being given a rating higher than the show's normal PG. However, the episode also skirted the issue of whether Jadzia was bisexual or not. A similar situation involving the Trill also occurred on a previous episode of The Next Generation, but with the former partner turning down the invitation to be in a relationship with the joined Trill. Later, in 2003, Star Trek Enterprise had an episode called Stigma, which featured an allegory for the AIDS epidemic for World AIDS Day. However, Rick Berman stated that, quote, Stigma was supposed to be our gay episode, but we sort of copped out. Additionally, an episode of Deep Space Nine also featured a male character, Quark, being surgically altered to become a woman, and did feature the first kiss between male actors in the franchise. But this was mainly played for laughs, and was widely criticized for being transphobic, by continuing the stereotype that trans women were only trying to trick men, among other reasons. It also doesn't help that the episode is considered to be one of the worst written Deep Space Nine episodes ever made. However, Deep Space Nine also featured bisexual characters in the show's mirror universe, but this was also criticized for continuing the stereotype of bisexuals being evil or promiscuous. Other episodes throughout the franchise made tangential mentions to queerness as well, though none as directly as those episodes. While it should be noted that all of these episodes of Star Trek received criticisms for failing on some level, it also provided some representation for LGBTQ people in a time where many were starved for that representation. While certainly these episodes are not above criticism, the importance they held for many, including myself, cannot be understated. Seeing Jadzia kiss a woman meant a lot to many lesbian Trek fans. I myself remember rewatching The Outcast over and over again, because it gave me a safe way to understand that I was transgender. While certainly the failings of the Trek franchise, and perhaps Rick Berman, should be discussed, we should not overlook the series' important if sadly too few, successes. On top of that, queer issues found their way into Trek in less overt ways, notably in the books or video games. Gene Roddenberry included references to bisexuality in his novelization of Star Trek the Motion Picture. Other Trek novels revealed characters' sexuality, such as showing that Star Trek First Contact character Lieutenant Hawk was gay. Several LGBTQ characters appear exclusively in the numerous novels in the Trek Expanded Universe, such as a hermaphroditic and bisexual character of Burgoyne in the best-selling Star Trek New Frontier series. The Andorian species were also revealed to have 4 genders, instead of just 2. And on top of all of this, in 2005, original series actor George Takei came out as gay, and quickly became one of the most prominent LGBTQ celebrities in the country. The 2016 film Star Trek Beyond paid homage to Takei by making a small reference to show that the character he had originated, Sulu, was gay. Takei criticized this decision, as he stated that he played the character as straight. I hoped instead that Gene Roddenberry's original characters and their backgrounds would be respected. How exciting would it be instead if a new hero might be created, whose story could be fleshed out from scratch rather than reinvented? To me, this would have been even more impactful. This hope would eventually come true in 2017, with Anthony Rapp and Wilson Cruz playing the first explicitly gay main characters in the franchise on Star Trek Discovery.
Don't do anything that stupid ever again. You may not care about you, but I do. You sure you feel okay? Yes, dear doctor. I feel okay.
However, one would be incredibly remiss to ignore the power of Trekkies, as Trek fans had built a queer community around Star Trek long before Discovery, and also led to the creation of one of the largest genres of fan fiction, slash fiction. Slash fiction is fan fiction that focuses on romantic or sexual relationships between 2 fictional characters of the same sex. And Kirk/Spock was one of the first major slash stories that appeared, all the way back in the 1970s. Slash fiction has grown to be an incredibly powerful force for the formation of queer identities, representing a, quote, resistance to the expectation of compulsory heterosexuality. Slash fiction, both in Trek and other fandoms, allows fans to explore identities and sexualities that the official series could never or would never touch. It also provides, as Joanna Russ stated, a way to marry both masculine traits with supposed feminine traits like emotional vulnerability. In 1972, the first sexually themed Star Trek zine, Grupp, was published. Grupp's 3rd issue featured the first publicly published Star Trek slash fiction. Star Trek has also had a strong community of fans who make their own fan films, or low-budget Trek films, episodes, or series. Star Trek Hidden Frontier featured numerous queer cast members, and the famous Star Trek Phase 2 actually released a 2-part episode that adapted David Gerrold's unproduced Next Generation script, Blood and Fire.
Guess who?
On top of that, several fan groups were created to fight for queer representation in Star Trek, including See Trek Love and Voyager Visibility Project. So, in the end, it's clear that Trek has had a very long, if often tumultuous, relationship with the queer community. While the series certainly took its time to give us our first gay cast members, and still has a ways to go, the joy of the franchise is that it's always working to show a better future for humanity. Star Trek may not have always succeeded in allowing everyone to take part in that bright future, but it always works to better itself, and sometimes, in the end, actually gives us a glimpse of who we might be one day. As the great bird of the galaxy Gene Roddenberry once said, "It is the struggle itself that is most important. We must strive to be more than we are. It does not matter that we will not reach our ultimate goal. The effort itself yields its own reward." Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video and want more videos on Trek issues or Trek analysis or other LGBTQ issues in geek culture, consider checking out my channel. I have a ton of new videos and I release new ones every single Friday. Until next time, live long and prosper.